Samantha Crockett sat at the defendant's table, her hands clasped tightly together. The courtroom buzzed with quiet murmurs, but she barely heard them. Her focus was on the man standing across from her, Daniel Leavitt. He was tall, sharp, and carried himself with an air of confidence that made him seem almost untouchable. Samantha had faced many opponents in her years as a lawyer, but something about Leavitt felt different. She couldn't quite put her finger on it, but his presence unsettled her. The judge cleared his throat, signaling for everyone to settle down. Samantha took a deep breath, trying to calm the nerves bubbling inside her. This wasn't just another case, it mattered more than most. It involved one of her clients whose life could change forever depending on how this trial went. And now, here she was, facing off against someone who seemed like he might be impossible to beat. Leavitt began speaking, his voice smooth and steady. Every word he said hit Samantha like a punch to the gut. He laid out his arguments clearly, backing them up with facts and evidence that left little room for doubt. Samantha had prepared for this moment, spent countless hours going over every detail of the case, but somehow none of it felt enough anymore. Leavitt's words cut through her defenses like a knife slicing through paper. She tried to focus, reminding herself of all the strategies she had planned. But no matter how hard she concentrated, she couldn't shake off the feeling that she was losing control. Leavitt spoke about her client's past mistakes, bringing up things Samantha thought were long buried. Each sentence he delivered felt like a personal attack, even though she knew it wasn't meant that way. Still, it stung. Her mind raced as she searched for a way to counter him. She glanced at her notes, hoping to find some inspiration, but everything looked blurry. The courtroom spun around her, voices fading into a distant hum. All she could hear was Leavitt's voice, relentless and unyielding, pushing her closer to the edge. Finally, it became too much. Without thinking, Samantha stood up abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor with a loud screech. "You don't know me," she shouted, her voice echoing through the silent courtroom. "You have no right to talk about my client like that." The judge slammed his gavel down, demanding order. Whispers erupted among the spectators, their eyes glued to Samantha. She felt the heat rising to her cheeks, embarrassment washing over her. Never in her career had she lost her temper like this. What was happening to her? Leavitt didn't say anything. He simply stood there, watching her with those piercing eyes. There was no smugness or satisfaction in his expression, just a calm, almost curious look. It only fueled Samantha's frustration further. She wanted to scream, to lash out, but she forced herself to sit back down, gripping the edge of the table so tightly her knuckles turned white. Megan, her assistant, gave her a worried glance from the corner of the room. Samantha avoided looking at her, ashamed of what she had done. She knew she had let her emotions get the better of her, and now everyone in the courtroom would remember this moment. Leavitt had won this round, and she hated herself for letting it happen. As the hearing continued, Samantha struggled to regain her footing. Leavitt pressed on, dismantling every argument she tried to make. His words were like daggers, finding every weak spot in her defense. By the time the session ended, Samantha felt utterly defeated. She packed up her things quickly, avoiding eye contact with anyone as she hurried out of the courtroom. Back in her office, Samantha sank into her chair, burying her face in her hands. How had it come to this? She had always been known for staying, calm under pressure, for thinking clearly when others panicked. Yet today she had completely fallen apart. It was unlike her, and it scared her. Megan knocked softly on the door before stepping inside. "Are you okay?" she asked gently, placing a cup of coffee on Samantha's desk. "I'm fine," Samantha replied, though her tone betrayed her. She sighed deeply, running a hand through her hair. I don't know what happened out there." "You're human," Megan said with a small smile. "Everyone has bad days. Even the best lawyers lose their cool sometimes." Samantha appreciated the sentiment, but it didn't make her feel any better. She couldn't afford to have bad days, not when people's lives depended on her, especially not when someone like Daniel Leavitt was involved. "Tell me about him," Samantha said suddenly, looking up at Megan. Who is he really? Megan hesitated for a moment before pulling out a folder. I did some research while you were in court. Turns out Leavitt isn't your average lawyer. He graduated top of his class from Harvard Law School when he was barely 22. People call him a prodigy because he can anticipate moves before they're even made. Samantha frowned, flipping through the pages in the folder. There were articles about Leavitt's victories, interviews where he talked about his approach to law, and even rumors about his uncanny ability to read people. It was overwhelming, but also enlightening. Now she understood why he had been able to push her buttons so effectively. He's not invincible, Megan added, sensing Samantha's growing frustration. He's good, yes, but he's still human. You just need to figure out how to beat him. Samantha nodded slowly, absorbing Megan's words. She realized she couldn't let today define her. If anything, it should motivate her to work harder, smarter. She needed to dig deeper, find new ways to fight back. Because if she didn't, Leavitt would walk all over her, and she couldn't let that happen. That evening, after everyone else had left the office, Samantha stayed behind. She pored over case files, re-examining every piece of evidence, searching for anything she might have missed. Her mind replayed the events of the day, especially the moment she had lost control. She vowed never to let it happen again. By the time she finally left the office, the city was bathed in darkness. The streets were quiet, save for the occasional car passing by. Samantha walked briskly, her thoughts consumed by the challenge ahead. Tomorrow would be a new day, and she intended to face it head-on. No matter what it took, she would prove to herself and to Daniel Leavitt that she was more than capable of holding her ground. The next morning, Samantha woke up earlier than usual. She didn't bother with breakfast. Her stomach was too tied in knots to even think about food. Instead, she dressed quickly and headed straight to the office. The streets were still quiet, the sun just beginning to peek over the horizon. It gave her a strange sense of calm, as if the world hadn't yet started moving at full speed. For a brief moment, she allowed herself to feel hopeful. When she arrived at her desk, she found Megan already there, sifting through papers. I figured you'd be here early, Megan said with a small smile. Thought you might need some help. Samantha appreciated the gesture more than she could say. Thanks, she replied simply, taking a seat. Together, they began reviewing the case again, this time with fresh eyes. Samantha knew she couldn't afford to make the same mistakes as before. If she wanted to stand a chance against Leavitt, she needed to find something, anything, that could give her an edge. Megan handed her another file. Here's more on Leavitt, she said. I dug deeper last night. Thought you might want to see this. Samantha opened the folder cautiously, unsure if she really wanted to know more about the man who had so easily unraveled her composure. But curiosity got the better of her, and she began reading. What she discovered surprised her. Yes, Leavitt was brilliant, but he wasn't perfect. There were hints of arrogance in his past interviews, subtle signs that he believed no one could match him. And while that confidence made him formidable, it also left room for error, if someone was willing to take the risk. Look at this, Megan said, pointing to a specific paragraph. He doesn't just rely on facts or legal precedents, he studies people, their habits, their weaknesses, and uses that against them. That's why he seems so unstoppable. Samantha frowned, absorbing the information. She realized now why she had felt so exposed during the trial. Leavitt hadn't been attacking her arguments alone, he had been targeting her. Every word he spoke had been designed to push her buttons, to make her doubt herself, and she had fallen right into his trap. But understanding his strategy was only half the battle. Now she needed to figure out how to counter it. Samantha leaned, back in her chair, staring at the ceiling as she thought. If Leavitt thrived on exploiting vulnerabilities, then she needed to turn that around. What if she used his own tactics against him? What if she let him think he was winning, only to pull the rug out from under him when he least expected it? It was a risky plan, but Samantha didn't have much choice. She spent the rest of the day working with Megan to refine their approach. They went over every detail of the case, looking for opportunities to plant seeds of doubt in Leavitt's mind. Samantha knew she couldn't match him blow for blow, not directly anyway. But if she played her cards right, she might be able to outmaneuver him. By the time evening rolled around, Samantha felt a flicker of hope. She still had a long way to go, but at least she had a plan. As she packed up her things to leave, Megan stopped her. "Don't forget," she said firmly. "You're not doing this alone, we're a team." Samantha nodded, grateful for the reminder. She often forgot that she didn't have to shoulder everything by herself. Having Megan by her side gave her strength, and she vowed not to underestimate the power of teamwork moving forward. The following day, Samantha returned to court with renewed determination. She walked into the room with her head held high, refusing to let Leavitt intimidate her. He stood near the prosecutor's table, flipping through documents, seemingly unfazed by her presence. When he finally looked up, their eyes met briefly. Samantha forced herself to hold his gaze, refusing to look away. It was a small victory, but it gave her confidence. The hearing began, and this time, Samantha was ready. She listened carefully to Leavitt's opening statements, analyzing every word. He was clever, as always, weaving a narrative that painted her client in the worst possible light. But Samantha noticed something new, a slight hesitation in his tone, a crack in his otherwise flawless delivery. It was subtle, almost imperceptible, but it was there. When it was her turn to speak, Samantha took a deep breath and stepped forward. Her voice was steady, her words deliberate. She acknowledged the points Leavitt had raised, addressing them head-on without letting them rattle her. Then, she introduced a piece of evidence they had saved specifically for this moment. It wasn't earth-shattering, but it was enough to cast doubt on Leavitt's arguments. Leavitt reacted exactly as Samantha had hoped. His brow furrowed slightly, and he paused for a fraction of a second before responding. To anyone else, it might have gone unnoticed, but Samantha saw it. She had planted the first seed of uncertainty in his mind. As the hearing continued, Samantha kept pushing. She introduced more evidence strategically, each piece building on the last. Leavitt countered her moves with skill, but Samantha could tell he was starting to feel the pressure. His responses grew sharper, more aggressive, as if he was trying to regain control. But Samantha stayed calm, refusing to rise to the bait. During a break in the proceedings, Samantha stepped outside for some fresh air. The tension in the courtroom was suffocating, and she needed a moment to clear her head. As she stood there, leaning against the railing, she heard footsteps behind her. Turning, she saw Leavitt approaching. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then Leavitt broke the silence. "You're tougher than I thought," he said, his tone neutral. "Most people crumble after the first round." Samantha raised an eyebrow, unsure how to respond. Was he complimenting her? Mocking her? She decided to play it safe. "I'm not most people," she replied evenly. Leavitt chuckled softly, shaking his head. "No, you're not. I'll give you that." He paused, studying her intently. "But don't think this changes anything. I'm still going to win." "We'll see about that," Samantha shot back, her voice firm. She turned and walked back inside, leaving Leavitt standing there. Back in the courtroom, the hearing resumed. Samantha continued to execute her plan, staying one step ahead of Leavitt whenever possible. She noticed that his confidence was wavering, though he tried hard to hide it. Each time she landed a blow, however minor, she felt a surge of satisfaction. This was what she had been waiting for, a chance to prove herself. By the end of the session, Samantha felt exhausted but exhilarated. She hadn't won yet, but she had made progress. For the first time since the trial began, she felt like she was truly competing. Leavitt may have been a genius, but he wasn't invincible, and Samantha was determined to remind him of that. That night, as she lay in bed, Samantha reflected on the day's events. She had faced one of the toughest challenges of her career, and come out stronger. There was still a long road ahead, and she knew Leavitt wouldn't go down without a fight. But for now, she allowed herself to feel a sense of accomplishment. She had found her footing, and she wasn't going to lose it again. Tomorrow would bring new battles, new obstacles. But Samantha was ready. Whatever came next, she would face it head-on, with courage, with determination, and with the knowledge that she was capable of more than she had ever imagined. The next morning, Samantha woke up with a sense of purpose. She had spent the night replaying the previous day's events in her mind, analyzing every move she and Leavitt had made. Each moment felt like a chess match, with both players trying to anticipate the other's next step. Samantha realized that while she couldn't predict everything Leavitt would do, she could prepare herself for any possibility. That was the key, being ready for anything. She arrived at the office early, just as she had the day before. Megan was already there, waiting with a cup of coffee and a stack of notes. "Morning," Megan greeted her with a smile. "Ready for round 3? Samantha nodded, sipping the warm coffee gratefully. "As ready as I'll ever be." They spent the next few hours going over their strategy again. Samantha knew they couldn't rely solely on evidence or arguments. They needed to think outside the box. If Leavitt thrived on reading people, then they needed to make him question what he thought he knew about her. It was risky, but it might be their only chance. "Let's focus on timing," Samantha said, leaning forward. "We need to control the pace of the trial. If we dictate when things happen, we can keep him off balance." Megan nodded enthusiastically. "And we can use his confidence against him. Make him think he's winning until it's too late." Samantha liked the idea. She began jotting down notes, sketching out a plan that involved introducing new evidence gradually, forcing Leavitt to adjust his arguments repeatedly. The goal was to wear him down, to make him second-guess himself. It wouldn't be easy, but it was worth a shot. By mid-morning, they were back in court. Samantha took her seat, feeling more composed than she had in days. Leavitt glanced at her briefly, his expression unreadable. She wondered if he could sense the shift in her demeanor, if he knew she was no longer the same lawyer who had lost her temper days ago. Whatever he was thinking, he didn't show it. The hearing began, and Samantha immediately put their plan into action. When it was her turn to speak, she introduced a piece of evidence casually, almost as an afterthought. It wasn't particularly damning, but it planted a seed of doubt in the jury's minds. Leavitt countered quickly, dismissing it as irrelevant, but Samantha noticed the flicker of hesitation in his eyes. He wasn't sure why she had brought it up, and that uncertainty was exactly what she wanted. Throughout the session, Samantha continued to introduce small surprises, minor details that seemed insignificant on their own but added up over time. Leavitt handled each one expertly, but Samantha could tell he was starting to feel the strain. His responses grew sharper, his movements more deliberate. He was working harder to stay ahead, and Samantha knew she was getting under his skin. During a recess, Samantha stepped outside for some air. She spotted Leavitt nearby, talking quietly with his assistant. They seemed deep in conversation, and Samantha couldn't help but wonder what they were discussing. Was he questioning his own strategy, or was he planning something even bigger? When the hearing resumed, Leavitt came out swinging. He launched into a powerful argument, dismantling one of Samantha's key points with surgical precision. For a moment, Samantha felt her confidence waver. But then she reminded herself of the plan. This was part of the game, to let him think he was winning only to pull the rug out from under him later. As the day wore on, Samantha noticed something interesting. Leavitt was becoming more aggressive, almost desperate. His calm, calculated demeanor was cracking, revealing glimpses of frustration beneath the surface. Samantha seized the opportunity, pressing her advantage whenever she could. She asked pointed questions during cross-examination, forcing him to clarify statements that didn't quite add up. Each time he responded smoothly, but the cracks were beginning to show. By the end of the session, Samantha felt a glimmer of hope. She hadn't won yet, but she had made significant progress. Leavitt was no longer untouchable. He was human, just like her. And humans made mistakes. That evening, Samantha returned to her office, exhausted but satisfied. Megan was waiting for her, a look of pride on her face. "You did great today," she said. "I think you rattled him." "I hope so," Samantha replied, sinking into her chair. "But we're not done yet. He's still dangerous." Megan nodded in agreement. What's the next step? Samantha leaned back, closing her eyes as she thought. We need to tighten our grip. Tomorrow we go for the jugular. The following morning, Samantha woke up with a mix of excitement and nerves. Today was the day she planned to deliver the final blow, or at least set the stage for it. She dressed carefully, choosing an outfit that exuded confidence. As she walked into the courtroom, she felt a surge of determination. This was her moment. Leavitt was already there, reviewing documents at the prosecutor's table. He glanced up as she entered, his expression neutral. If he was worried, he didn't show it, but Samantha knew better. Beneath that calm exterior, he was calculating, strategizing, trying to figure out her next move. The hearing began, and Samantha wasted no time. She launched into her argument with clarity and conviction, weaving together facts and emotions in a way that captivated the jury. Leavitt listened intently, his pen moving rapidly across his notepad. Samantha could see the wheels turning in his head as he tried to anticipate where she was going. Then, she dropped the bomb, a piece of evidence she had been saving for this exact moment. It wasn't earth-shattering, but it directly contradicted one of Leavitt's earlier claims. The room fell silent as everyone processed the revelation. Leavitt froze for a split second, his composure faltering. It was subtle, but Samantha caught. And when it was his turn to respond, Leavitt recovered quickly, spinning the evidence to fit his narrative. But Samantha could tell it had shaken him. His voice lacked its usual confidence, and his gestures were slightly exaggerated, as if he was trying too hard to convince everyone, including himself, that he was still in control. Samantha pressed on, relentless. She asked tough questions, challenged his assumptions, and forced him to defend positions he hadn't fully prepared for. The jury watched intently, their expressions shifting as they weighed the arguments. Samantha knew she was making an impact. During a break, Samantha stepped outside to collect her thoughts. She found Leavitt standing alone near the courthouse steps, staring off into the distance. For once, he looked less like the polished legal genius and more like a man carrying the weight of the world on his shoulders. Samantha hesitated, unsure whether to approach him. In the end, she decided against it. There was no point in engaging now. The battle would continue inside. When the hearing resumed, Samantha delivered her closing remarks. Her voice was steady, her words measured. She painted a picture of justice, fairness, and truth, appealing not just to logic, but to emotion. The jury listened closely, their faces reflecting the impact of her words. Leavitt followed with his own closing statement. He spoke with passion and authority, attempting to reclaim the ground he had lost. But Samantha noticed something different. This time, his delivery felt forced, as if he was struggling to maintain his usual poise. She allowed herself a small private smile. She had done it. She had pushed him to his limits. As the judge dismissed the court for the day, Samantha packed up her things slowly, savoring the moment. She didn't know how the jury would decide, but she knew she had given it her all. Megan joined her outside, beaming with pride. "You were amazing," Megan said. "I've never seen anyone take on Leavitt like that." Samantha shrugged modestly. "We'll see how it goes. But yeah, I think we gave them something to think about." They walked back to the office together, discussing what might happen next. Samantha felt lighter than she had in weeks. No matter the outcome, she had proven to herself that she could stand toe-to-toe with one of the best lawyers in the business, and that knowledge was worth more than any verdict. That night, as she lay in bed, Samantha reflected on the journey she had been through. From the moment she had lost her temper in court to now, she had grown in ways she hadn't imagined possible. Facing Leavitt had been terrifying, exhausting, and exhilarating all at once. It had tested her limits, pushed her to dig deeper than she ever thought she could. Tomorrow, the jury would deliver their decision. Win or lose, Samantha knew she had earned something far greater than a victory in court: respect, for herself, for her abilities, and for the resilience she had discovered within her. And that, she realized, was the true measure of success. The morning of the verdict arrived, and Samantha woke up with a mix of anticipation and anxiety. She had spent the night tossing and turning, replaying every moment of the trial in her mind. What would the jury decide? Had she done enough to sway them? These questions swirled in her head, but she pushed them aside as she got ready for the day. Today wasn't about doubt. It was about resolution. When she arrived at the courthouse, the atmosphere was tense. Reporters milled around outside, cameras clicking as lawyers and spectators filed in. Samantha kept her focus sharp, refusing to let the chaos distract her. Inside the courtroom, she took her seat and glanced at the jury box. The jurors sat stone-faced, their expressions unreadable. It was impossible to tell what they were thinking, and that uncertainty gnawed at her. Leavitt entered moments later, looking as composed as ever. He exchanged a few quiet words with his assistant before taking his place at the prosecutor's table. His calm demeanor irritated Samantha slightly. How could he appear so unruffled when the stakes were so high? But she reminded herself not to dwell on it. Leavitt's confidence didn't matter now. All that mattered was the jury's decision. Q. Judge entered, calling the court to order. Everyone stood respectfully as he took his seat, then settled back down. The foreman of the jury rose slowly, holding a slip of paper in his hand. Samantha held her breath, her heart pounding in her chest. This was it. The moment everything would come to a head. "Has the jury reached a verdict?" the judge asked, his voice steady. "We have, Your Honor," the foreman replied. Samantha felt her stomach twist into knots as the foreman handed the slip of paper to the bailiff, who passed it to the judge. The judge scanned it briefly, then nodded. "Please read the verdict," he said, his tone neutral. The foreman cleared his throat and began. "On the charge of—" He paused, glancing at the paper again. Samantha's mind raced, trying to prepare for whatever came next. Finally, he spoke the words. "We find the defendant not guilty." A wave of relief washed over Samantha. Her client was free. The courtroom erupted into murmurs, and she allowed herself a small smile. Megan, sitting behind her, gave her a thumbs up, her eyes shining with pride. Across the room, Leavitt remained stoic, though Samantha thought she saw a flicker of disappointment cross his face. As the judge thanked the jury and dismissed them, Samantha exhaled deeply. She hadn't realized how tightly she'd been holding her breath. The victory felt surreal, almost too good to be true. After weeks of battling against one of the sharpest legal minds she'd ever encountered, she had emerged victorious. It was a testament to her hard work, resilience, and ability to adapt under pressure. After the hearing concluded, Samantha met with her client outside the courtroom. Tears streamed down their face as they hugged her tightly. "Thank you," they whispered, their voice trembling with emotion. "I don't know how to repay you." "You don't have to," Samantha replied gently. "Just go live your life. That's repayment enough." Her client nodded, still overcome with gratitude. As they walked away, Samantha felt a profound sense of fulfillment. This was why she became a lawyer, to help people navigate difficult situations and fight for justice. Winning this case reminded her of the impact she could make, even when the odds seemed insurmountable. Later that afternoon, Samantha returned to her office. Megan greeted her with a celebratory cup of coffee. "You did it!" she exclaimed. "I knew you could." Samantha smiled, sipping the warm drink. "It wasn't just me. You were there every step of the way. I couldn't have done it without you." Megan waved off the compliment modestly. "Still, this is huge. Beating someone like Leavitt? That's no small feat." The mention of Leavitt brought Samantha's thoughts back to him. Despite the outcome, she couldn't deny the respect she had developed for him during the trial. He was brilliant, relentless, and undeniably skilled. Facing him had pushed her to grow in ways she hadn't anticipated. Even though she had won, she knew she owed him a debt of sorts for forcing her to become a better version of herself. That evening, as she packed up her things to leave, Samantha spotted Leavitt walking toward the elevator. She hesitated for a moment, then called out to him. "Leavitt." He turned, raising an eyebrow. "Crockett," he said, his tone neutral. "What do you want?" She approached him cautiously, unsure of how to begin. I just wanted to say, thank you. Leavitt looked surprised. For what? For pushing me, Samantha explained. If it weren't for you, I wouldn't have worked as hard as I did. You made me better. Leavitt studied her for a long moment, his expression softening slightly. You're welcome, he said finally. Though I wish the outcome had been different. Samantha chuckled softly. So do I, honestly. But hey, maybe next time. Leavitt smirked, a hint of amusement in his eyes. Next time, huh? Careful what you wish for. They shared a brief laugh, the tension between them easing. For the first time, Samantha saw him not as an adversary but as a peer, a fellow lawyer, who understood the challenges and rewards of their profession. They parted ways amicably, each heading home to reflect on the events of the past weeks. Back at her apartment, Samantha poured herself a glass of wine and sank onto the couch. The weight of the trial lifted from her shoulders, leaving behind a sense of peace she hadn't felt in a long time. She thought about everything she had learned, not just about law, but about herself. Facing Leavitt had taught her the importance of perseverance, strategy, and self-belief. It had also shown her that failure wasn't the end. It was simply a stepping stone to success. Her phone buzzed, pulling her from her thoughts. It was a text from Megan. Congratulations again, celebratory dinner tomorrow? My treat. Samantha smiled, typing a quick reply. Sounds perfect. Thanks, Meg. Setting her phone aside, she leaned back and closed her eyes. Tomorrow would bring new cases, new challenges, and perhaps even new rivals. But for now, she allowed herself to bask in the glow of victory. She had faced one of the toughest opponents of her career and come out stronger because of it. And that knowledge gave her hope, not just for her future as a lawyer, but for her growth as a person. Over the next few days, Samantha found herself reflecting on the trial often. She replayed key moments in her mind, analyzing what had worked and what she could improve upon. Each memory reinforced the lessons she had learned. Preparation was crucial, adaptability was essential, and confidence, true confidence born from experience, was invaluable. One afternoon, while reviewing documents, for a new case, Samantha received an unexpected email. It was from Leavitt. The subject line read simply, "A challenge." Curious, she opened it and began reading. Crockett, I'll admit, you impressed me. Not many people can hold their own against me in court. But I think we both know our last battle wasn't the final chapter. If you're interested, I've got another case coming up. Something complex, something challenging. I'd love to see if you can keep up. Samantha raised an eyebrow, intrigued. Was Leavitt offering her another chance to compete? Or was this some kind of trap? Either way, she couldn't resist the opportunity. Typing a quick response, she hit send before she could second-guess herself. Leavitt. Challenge accepted. Let's see what you've got. As she leaned back in her chair, a grin spread across her face. Whatever lay ahead, she was ready. The days following her email exchange with Leavitt passed quickly for Samantha. She dove headfirst into preparing for the new case he had mentioned, though details were still vague. Leavitt hadn't provided much information beyond the fact that it would be challenging, a statement that both excited and unnerved her. After their previous trial, she knew better than to underestimate him. If anything, his warning only fueled her determination to rise to the occasion. Samantha spent hours researching potential scenarios, brainstorming strategies, and reviewing past cases similar to what Leavitt might throw at her. Megan noticed the change in her demeanor. She seemed more focused, more driven than ever before. "You're really into this, aren't you?" Megan asked one afternoon as they worked side by side in the office. Samantha nodded, not looking up from the stack of papers in front of her. "It's not just about winning anymore," she admitted. "This is personal. I want to prove, to myself, to him, that I can handle whatever comes my way." Megan smiled, impressed by Samantha's resolve. "Well, if anyone can do it, it's you." When the official documents for the case finally arrived, Samantha opened them with a mix of excitement and trepidation. The case was even more complex than she had imagined, involving multiple parties, intricate legal precedents, and high stakes. It wasn't just a test of skill, it was a test of endurance, patience, and creativity. Samantha read through the files carefully, highlighting key points and jotting down notes. By the time she finished, her desk was cluttered with papers, sticky notes, and empty coffee cups. Leavitt wasted no time getting started. He filed motions early, setting a fast pace that left little room for error. Samantha matched his energy, responding swiftly and strategically. Their exchanges became a flurry of filings, counter-arguments, and courtroom skirmishes. Each hearing felt like a battle, with neither side willing to give an inch. What surprised Samantha most was how different this trial felt compared to the last one. There was no animosity between her and Leavitt, at least not outright. Instead, there was a strange sense of mutual respect, as if they were two athletes competing in a sport they both loved. They pushed each other to their limits, forcing one another to think harder, dig deeper, and perform better. It was exhilarating and exhausting. Despite the pressure, Samantha found herself enjoying the process. Every challenge Leavitt threw at her made her sharper, more adaptable. She began to anticipate his moves, learning to read the subtle cues in his arguments. At the same time, she experimented with new tactics, testing boundaries and taking risks she wouldn't have considered before. The courtroom became a proving ground, and Samantha relished every moment of it. One evening, after a particularly grueling day in court, Samantha stayed late at the office, going over transcripts and evidence. Megan stopped by with dinner, seeing the light still on under Samantha's door. "You're working too hard," Megan said, setting the food down on the desk. "You need to take a break." "I can't," Samantha replied, rubbing her temples. "If I stop now, I'll lose momentum." Megan sighed but didn't argue. Instead, she sat down across from Samantha and helped her sort through the piles of paperwork. Together, they identified patterns and connections Samantha hadn't noticed earlier. As the hours ticked by, the pieces of the puzzle began falling into place. By the time they finished, dawn was breaking outside the window. "Thanks," Samantha said, stretching her arms. "I couldn't have done this without you." Megan grinned. "That's what friends are for." As the trial progressed, Samantha noticed something interesting. Leavitt seemed to be enjoying himself too. His arguments grew bolder, his strategies more inventive. It was as if he was inspired by the challenge she presented. During one heated exchange, he leaned toward her and whispered, "You're making me work for this." "And isn't that what you wanted?" Samantha shot back, a hint of a smile on her lips. Leavitt chuckled softly, shaking his head. "Touché." Their interactions became less adversarial and more collaborative, though the competition remained fierce. Outside the courtroom, they occasionally shared brief conversations about law, strategy, and even life. Samantha discovered that beneath Leavitt's polished exterior was a man who genuinely cared about justice, not just winning. It was a revelation that deepened her respect for him. By the time closing arguments rolled around, Samantha felt ready. She had poured everything she had into this case, leaving no stone unturned. Standing before the jury, she delivered her final remarks with clarity and conviction. Her voice carried emotion, painting a vivid picture of truth and fairness. When she finished, the courtroom was silent, the weight of her words hanging in the air. Leavitt followed with his own closing statement, delivering a masterclass in persuasion. His arguments were flawless, his delivery commanding. For a moment, Samantha wondered if she had underestimated him again. But as she watched the jury's reactions, she realized something important. They weren't just listening to Leavitt. They were weighing his words against hers. The decision wouldn't come easily. The wait for the verdict was agonizing. Samantha tried to distract herself with other work, but her mind kept drifting back to the trial. Had she done enough? Was her argument persuasive enough to sway the jury? These questions haunted her until the morning of the verdict arrived. Once again, the courtroom buzzed with anticipation. Samantha took her seat, glancing at Leavitt across the aisle, He looked calm, composed, but she thought she detected a flicker of nervousness in his eyes. The judge entered, calling the court to order, and the foreman of the jury stood to deliver their decision. "We find in favor of the plaintiff," he announced, his voice steady. Samantha exhaled slowly, relief washing over her. She had won. But this victory felt different from the last one. It wasn't just about beating Leavitt. It was about proving to herself that she could thrive in the face of adversity. As the judge dismissed the court, she turned to see Leavitt, approaching her. "You did well," he said, extending his hand. "Better than I expected." Samantha shook his hand firmly, meeting his gaze. "So did you. Thanks for pushing me." Leavitt nodded, a small smile playing on his lips. "Until next time?" "Absolutely," Samantha replied, her tone confident. "Bring it on." They parted ways, each heading back to their respective offices. Samantha felt a renewed sense of purpose. Facing Leavitt had transformed her, not just as a lawyer, but as a person. She had learned to embrace challenges, to trust her instincts, and to persevere no matter how tough things got. That evening, Samantha sat on her balcony, watching the city lights twinkle in the distance. She thought about the journey she had been on, from the first chaotic courtroom confrontation to this latest triumph. Each step had taught her something valuable, shaping her into the person she was today. Her phone buzzed, pulling her from her thoughts. It was a text from Megan. "Another win. Dinner's on me tonight." Samantha laughed, typing a quick reply. "Deal, and thanks for having my back." Setting her phone aside, she leaned back in her chair, letting the cool night air wash over her. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities to grow. But for now, she allowed herself to savor the moment. She had faced one of the greatest trials of her career and emerged stronger because of it. And that knowledge gave her hope. For her future, for her profession, and for the endless possibilities ahead.